Why she never slept in that room again. The first night it happened, she told herself it was just the house settling. It was 2:31 a.m. in a tired duplex off Parsons Avenue in Columbus, and the kind of winter wind that finds the gaps in window frames was scratching at the glass. Riley Hart had moved in 3 days earlier, bed on the floor, one lamp, a coffee maker, and a box-labeled bathroom doubling as a nightstand. The back bedroom was painted a faded blue, the closet the older kind with a pull-string bulb, and a door that never quite closed without help. She liked the room during the day. After midnight, not as much. She woke because something had decided itself. Not a bang, not a creak. A click, the neat, deliberate release of a latch. Riley rolled onto an elbow and, in the little triangle of lamplight, watched her closet door ease open. 2 inches. 4. Until it stopped at a measured angle like a gesture practiced in a mirror. Cold air spilled out, carrying the smell of old linen and something faintly metallic. She held her breath and listened. The furnace coughed once and thought better of it. A truck hissed past on wet pavement. No footsteps, no whispering. The door sat there like a patient question. Riley stood, shut it, pressed until the latch kissed home, then dragged a weighted laundry basket in front of it because that's what you do when you want to be practical and 12 at the same time. She lay back down facing the closet and waited for some better version of herself to show up. It didn't. The lamp stayed on until dawn. The second night, it happened again. 2:37 a.m. this time, click, glide, stop. Same angle. The basket nudged a quiet inch across the floor. She closed it with her palm flat on the wood, the way you soothe a nervous horse. In the morning, she told her neighbor, Dana, in the shared driveway, 2 women in coats pretending they weren't checking each other for the kind of fear you can smell. Dana smiled like a person who's lived in old houses and said, "It's the draft off the attic hatch. That back room does it." Then softer, "You'll get used to it." Riley wanted that to be true. On night 3, Riley taped a thin strip of printer paper across the seam where door met frame, wrote the time on it, 2:12 a.m., and fell asleep in her sweatshirt with the light on low. At 2:45, the paper parted with a sound like a secret being told. The door opened to the exact same angle. The phone camera on the dresser caught nothing but compression noise and a shadow that might have been a shift in clouds. She watched the footage twice, then threw the blanket over her head and waited for morning like it was a bus. The landlord, Mr. Alvarez, came by at noon, tapped the jamb, rolled his eyes at the humidity, and replaced the strike plate with a new one he swore by. "These old doors breathe," he said. "Close the vent at night, and you'll be fine." He smiled, took a rent check that still smelled like the bank envelope, and left. That night, at 2:45 on the nose, the door clicked and opened again. New strike plate, vent closed, logic ignored. Riley sat up and realized she wasn't afraid in the horror movie way. She was angry. The room felt like it knew her schedule. "No," she said, the word coming out small and stubborn. She got up, nudged the door shut, and wedged a backless chair under the knob for the first time since college. The chair leaned as if listening. She slept in 10-minute shots until her 6:30 alarm insisted. Day 5, she took a roll of painter's tape and dusted the floor in front of the closet with a little line of baby powder. If the chair moved, if the door swung, she'd see the scuff. She set an old phone to record with the screen off and a newer one to buzz at 2:44 to catch her on the way up from sleep. She told herself she was being ridiculous, and also that ridiculous sometimes keeps you alive. At 2:44, the phone buzzed under her pillow like a trapped bee. She opened her eyes to the dark and the familiar ache in her jaw from clenching, then watched the minute flip. 2:45. Click. The door opened. The chair nudged. The powder made a soft crescent. And this part she would only admit to herself. Much later, the pull-string bulb inside the closet blinked once, the tiny ceramic chain giving the gentlest clink, even though she hadn't touched it. She shut the door and didn't look at the phone footage until morning. When she did, the video was there and wasn't. A 16-minute file full of grain, A single frame where the chair was half an inch to the left, the kind of thing anyone could dispute if they wanted to. Saturday afternoon, Dana invited her for coffee and a normal conversation about trash pickup and the best bodega for late-night eggs. Riley didn't want to be the kind of person who brought up closets. Then Dana said, like a person setting down a fragile box, the woman who lived there before you. She never used that room either. Kept her office in the dining room. Said the back felt busy. She laughed without humor. It's a weird block. You'll get used to it. Riley tried. She rearranged. She pushed the bed against the long wall so she wouldn't face the closet. She swapped the lamp for a brighter bulb like daylight could be bought. She told herself a different story. Houses are math. Solve the angles and the air, and you solve the rest. On the 6th night, she woke to a different sound. Something like fabric on wood. She sat up and saw the closet door open at its usual pose, and the pull-string chain still moving, a tiny pendulum counting out a rhythm that wasn't the clock's. She stood. The air inside the closet was cooler by a breath. She reached for the chain, held it until it stilled, and let it go. It stayed. She stepped back and noticed, for the first time, a small square cut in the ceiling of the closet, an attic access the size of a pizza box, with 2 finger smudges in the dust along the edge where someone would push. Her mouth went dry. She shut the door and slid the chair back under the knob until the back pressed into wood. Sunday, she bought a door wedge, a second chain for the bedroom door, and a cheap motion sensor from a big box store because that's what shelves of blister packs recommend. The motion sensor went inside the closet on the shelf under the bulb. If anything in there moved, she'd know. She ate soup standing up in the kitchen, every light on. She called her sister and said everything was fine at 2:45. The wedge held. The chair creaked. The motion sensor didn't beep. Riley almost smiled. Then her phone lit her face with a notification she hadn't expected. A photo had been added to her, recents. Her hands went ice cold. She opened the gallery. A picture stared back her, in bed, on her side, mouth open a little in sleep, the closet door behind her, over her shoulder, not quite visible. The photo was well framed, a hair soft like it had been taken fast. The timestamp said 2:45:3. She sat up so hard the wedge skittered, and the chair bit the floor. She turned the lamp to bright and scanned the room. Empty. She checked the front door chain, the living room windows, the bathroom. The apartment was as she had left it. Her heart did a drum solo that refused to end. She went back to the bed, stood in the doorway, and looked at the closet. At the small square in the closet ceiling. At the finger smudges in the dust. The next morning, she called Mr. Alvarez and didn't bother with politeness. "I need the attic checked," she said, voice steady like a table with a book under the short leg. "Today." He came with a ladder and an apologetic shrug. "Raccoons?" he offered. She didn't answer. He pulled the closet's hanging rod down to make space, set the ladder, and pushed on the hatch. It stuck, then gave with a dry sigh. Cold, old air fell into the room, the smell of insulation, and something stale and human. Mr. Alvarez aimed his phone flashlight up, winced, and got quiet in a way people do when their brain is writing 2 stories at once. There was a flattened sleeping bag, 2 empty water bottles, a bag of chips folded shut with care, a coil of string, and, near the edge above the closet, a small handheld mirror duct taped to a stick angled down through the hatch. He climbed down slow. "I'm calling this in," he said, as if to the room. "I'm calling this in right now." Officer Ruiz arrived with another cop who kept his hand near his belt the entire time like good habits stay on duty. They photographed everything. They pressed the hatch door for prints that probably wouldn't keep a promise. Ruiz found the other end of the string tied neatly to the closet pull chain. Another length lay coiled around the attic hatch latch. From above, he said, more to his partner than to her, he could pull this and let himself down without making noise. "He?" Riley managed. Ruiz's face shifted from professional to human and back. "We can't say for sure, but I don't like that mirror." He gestured. "There's an exterior access in the eaves. He could have been in and out without the front door moving. Renters next door said they heard the roof once or twice." Said nothing because, you know, city noises. Riley showed him the photo on her phone. He nodded slowly, like a person trying not to say the wrong thing in a room that already had too many wrong things in it. "We'll dust the hatch and the ladder, and I'd like you to stay somewhere else tonight." He looked around the blue room, the tape on the door seam, the baby powder ghosting the floorboards. "You did good with the wedge. But don't fight the house on this one." She slept on Dana's couch that night with a blanket that smelled like laundry detergent commercials and a dog that insisted the safest place for the world was between her knees. At 2:45, she was still awake. A train took the curve like a long, tired thought. She stared at the ceiling and waited for a click that wasn't hers. It never came. In the morning, Mr. Alvarez texted a photo unfinished plywood over the attic opening, 2 new screws sunk deep, a patch that looked like a full stop at the end of a sentence. He offered to change the locks, pay for a hotel, let her break the lease. She didn't answer right away. She stood in the driveway with coffee in a paper cup and realized there was no version of herself that would ever sleep in that back room again. She went back only for her things. Early afternoon, sun high, Dana at her shoulder without comment. The room looked smaller. The closet door was closed, screwed shut. Actually, Mr. Alvarez's work evident and apologetic. Riley opened the dresser, packed a box, then another. On impulse, she pulled the painter's tape from the doorframe and found, under the scuffed white, the faintest outline of a pencil mark, someone else's line from long ago marking where the door always stopped. She pressed her thumb to it and then wiped it away. She moved that week 1 bedroom on the 3rd floor of a brick building across town near the park where joggers make a pretty map in the morning. The new place has a closet with a sliding door and no attic hatch. She keeps a wedge anyway. She tells herself it's a habit now, like locking the car twice, even in daylight. She does not tell new neighbors about Parsons Avenue. She does not say the word mirror if she can help it. Every so often, when sleep is delicate and the wind remembers the angle of that old street, Riley wakes at 2:45. Heart already ahead of her. The apartment is quiet. The closet is quiet. She lies on her side and listens to the building breathe and waits out the minute. When 2:46 arrives, she lets herself exhale. She turns the pillow to the cool side and reminds herself where she lives. Why she never slept in that room again isn't complicated. Not after the attic, not after the string, not after the photo taken at 2:45 while she was sleeping and no one was there. It isn't haunted, she tells herself, at least not in the way people mean when they talk about ghosts. It was watched. It was practiced. It was a room with a routine someone else had written. If you ask her now, she'll tell you it was the mirror that did it. Not the sleeping bag, not the bottles, not the hatch. The mirror taped to a stick, angled into her life with care. She will say it slowly, the way you say a name you would like the world to forget, and then, almost smiling, she'll add, "I sleep fine these days." But at 2:45, she still listens, just in case the night remembers her, and decides to check whether the new closet opens on the same schedule. The voice that calls your name at 3 a.m.? All right, folks, gather round, because tonight we're diving into a story that's going to make you think twice about those deep, dark hours of the early morning. It's a chilling account, one that comes to us from the secluded, heavily wooded outskirts of Traverse City, Michigan. A place known for its natural beauty, its peaceful lakes, and, for one man, a terrifying nightly ritual that seemed to defy all logic. This isn't just a tale of things that go bump in the night. No. This is about a voice that knew his name and called to him every single night at precisely 3 a.m. Our story begins with a man named Mark. Mark was a freelance graphic designer, an artist by trade, accustomed to long, quiet nights working on projects. He'd recently purchased a small, rustic cabin on a few acres, a place that offered him the solitude and inspiration he craved. The cabin was old, built in the 1950s, with a stone fireplace, exposed wooden beams, and windows that looked out onto an endless expanse of forest. He loved the tranquility, the way the crickets chirped outside, the distant hoot of an owl. He was, by all accounts, living his dream. Then, the calls started. It began subtly, as these things often do. A soft, almost ethereal whisper just at the edge of his hearing. He'd be working, engrossed in a design, and then he'd hear it. A faint murmur, like someone speaking his name, just on the cusp of audibility. He'd pause his music, take off his headphones, and listen. Nothing. Just the hum of his computer, the gentle crackle of the fire. He'd shake his head, attributing it to fatigue, a trick of the mind. He was, after all, often up until the early hours. But the whispers became more frequent, more distinct, and they always, without fail, seemed to happen around the same time. He started glancing at the clock on his screen, or the one on the microwave in his open-plan living area. Always, it seemed, the digital digits read something close to 3, 0 a.m., 2, 58, 3, 1, 3, 3, always in that narrow window. One particularly quiet Tuesday night, Mark was finishing up a project. The house was utterly still, the forest outside a blanket of silence. He felt a sudden, profound drop in temperature in the room. Despite the roaring fire, a cold prickle ran up his spine. And then, clear as day, right beside his ear, a soft, feminine voice whispered, "Mark." He froze. His heart leaped into his throat. He spun around, frantically scanning the room. Empty. Completely. Utterly. Empty. The windows were locked, the doors bolted. There was no one else in the cabin. He fumbled for his phone, the screen lighting up to show 3:0 a.m. exactly. This was no longer a coincidence. Mark, the logical graphic designer, tried to rationalize it. Echoes from the old walls? A rogue radio signal? He even went so far as to replace his smoke detectors, thinking maybe a faulty battery was emitting strange sounds. He checked every appliance, every outlet, nothing. The cabin was, by all technological measures, completely sound. But the voice persisted. Every night, precisely at 3:0 a.m., the cold would descend, and then a soft, almost mournful whisper would call his name. Mark. Sometimes it sounded pleading, sometimes just a gentle acknowledgement. It never escalated into shouts or screams, never felt overtly malicious, just present and terrifyingly consistent. He started trying to stay awake for it. He'd drink energy drinks, play loud music, watch movies, anything to fight off sleep, to be fully conscious when it happened, to prove to himself that he wasn't dreaming. He wanted to catch it, to understand it. But even wide awake, the experience was the same. At 3:0 a.m., the cold would envelop him, and the voice would call his name. One night, around 2:55 a.m., as he sat at his desk, staring intently at the digital clock, the voice whispered again, but this time it seemed to carry a hint of sadness. Mark, don't go. He hadn't been planning to go anywhere, but the specificity of the comment, the almost mournful tone, made the hairs on his arms stand on end. It felt personal, like it knew his thoughts, or perhaps was trying to communicate something deeper than just a simple call. He was losing significant sleep, his artistic focus was gone, replaced by a constant state of anxiety and dread. He looked perpetually tired, his eyes shadowed, his usual creative spark completely extinguished. He felt like he was living in a perpetual state of waiting, dreading the approach of 3 a.m., yet morbidly compelled to witness what would happen. He knew it sounded utterly insane. He knew anyone he told would think he was hallucinating, that the solitude had finally gotten to him. But the relentless consistency of it, that was what truly unnerved him. Finally, at his wit's end, Mark confided in his younger brother David. David was a high school history teacher, intelligent and open-minded, but also pragmatic. He listened patiently, a concerned frown on his face, as Mark recounted the nightly terror, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mark," David said gently, "this sounds like severe sleep deprivation. Maybe some stress-induced auditory hallucinations. You need to get out of there for a bit." "No," Mark insisted, desperation in his eyes. "You have to experience it, David. You have to." Reluctantly, and out of deep brotherly concern, David agreed to spend a few nights at the cabin. He brought a sleeping bag, a book, and a healthy dose of skepticism. He wasn't going to let his brother's vivid imagination get the better of him. That first night, David settled into the guest room, a small bedroom just off the main living area. He opted to read, wanting to stay awake and see if anything unusual truly happened. He kept his phone beside him, ready to record any strange sounds. He was determined to find a logical explanation for Mark's distress. As the hours crept by, the cabin grew profoundly silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy, almost suffocating. David, despite his initial confidence, felt a strange tension begin to build in the air. He checked his phone. 2:50 a.m. His heart began to beat a little faster. He heard Mark moving about in the living room, probably making more coffee, waiting. David stayed perfectly still, every nerve-ending alert, listening to the cabin creak and groan, and then, precisely at 3:00 a.m., David felt it. An immediate, undeniable drop in temperature in his small room, as if someone had flung open a window to a winter storm. He shivered violently, goosebumps erupting on his arms. And then, from the living room, clearly, distinctly, he heard it. A whisper. Not words, not quite. More like a soft, drawn-out sigh, followed by a faint, almost inaudible "Mark." David sat bolt upright in bed. His mind, usually so quick to find explanations, was reeling. The whisper was too real, too clear, too perfectly timed with the sudden cold. It wasn't loud enough to startle him into a shout, but it was absolutely there, a gentle, chilling call. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking, but the whisper had already faded. He looked at the time. Still, 3:00 a.m. The entire experience had lasted only a few seconds, but the impact was profound. The next morning, David looked as shaken as Mark. Over breakfast, his face was pale, his usual composure replaced by a bewildered fear. "I heard it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The cold and the whisper." Mark just nodded, a weary, knowing look in his eyes. "I told you, David." For the next few nights, David stayed, but nothing else happened. The voice only seemed to call to Mark. However, David's presence seemed to validate Mark's experience, providing him with a fragile sense of sanity. Together, they delved into the history of the cabin and the land. They visited the local historical society, poring over old property deeds, newspaper archives, and even dusty local folklore books. They spoke to the oldest residents in the nearby town, looking for any story, any detail that could shed light on the nightly phenomenon. They found it. A dark, forgotten piece of local history. Decades ago, the land where Mark's cabin now stood had been owned by a reclusive woman named Martha Vance. Martha was an herbalist, a quiet soul who lived off the grid long before it was fashionable. She was known for her knowledge of local plants and her self-sufficiency, but her life took a tragic turn. She fell gravely ill, alone in her cabin, far from any help. The story went that Martha, in her final hours, had been desperate. She had tried to call out for help, to signal to anyone, but her voice was weak, failing. Neighbors from a mile down the dirt road occasionally reported hearing faint, almost mournful cries echoing through the woods in the early morning hours, but dismissed them as coyotes or the wind. The local legend claimed she had passed away in her bed, utterly alone, her last, fading breath exhaled at a specific, early hour. The most chilling detail emerged from an old, handwritten coroner's report they found buried deep in the county archives. It wasn't an official medical report, but a detailed account from a local, self-appointed investigator who had discovered Martha's body. He had meticulously documented the scene, including the time of discovery and his estimation of her time of death. His notes stated that, based on his observations, Martha Vance had likely taken her last breath at precisely 3:00 a.m. And her final, desperate call for help, her last attempt to reach another human soul, had been a whispered plea for someone, anyone, to come to her. A soft, barely audible help. Mark and David stared at the report, a cold dread washing over them. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a horrifying, gut-wrenching certainty. The cold, the whispering voice, the unwavering time. It wasn't just a random echo. It was Martha Vance. Her desperate final plea, an imprint on the very fabric of the cabin, calling out for help, for connection, for someone to hear her. And because Mark's name was so similar to Martha, or perhaps just because he was the one who listened, it had latched on to him. The voice was not asking for him, but it was calling out, and he was hearing it. And then, the new unsettling implication, "don't go," was not a warning. It was a projection of her own final lonely moments. She didn't want him to leave her alone, just as she had been left. Mark couldn't live there anymore. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb, a perpetual stage for Martha's endless, lonely plea. He sold it, not daring to mention the nightly calls or the chilling history to the new buyers. He just wanted to escape the relentless, desperate echo. He lives in a new apartment now, in a bustling city, far from the silent, dense woods. He sleeps soundly, undisturbed by spectral whispers. But sometimes, when the city noise fades, and the night is particularly quiet, he'll wake for no reason, a cold sweat on his brow. He'll glance at his clock, and if it's anywhere near 3:00 a.m., he can almost hear it. Not the monitor, but the faint, ethereal whisper, just at the edge of his hearing. A soft, mournful call, "Mark!" And he wonders if Martha Vance, in that old cabin deep in the Michigan woods, is still whispering her desperate plea. And if, somewhere, someone else is now hearing the voice that calls your name at 3 a.m. So, what do you think? Was it truly the lingering echo of a lost soul, forever seeking connection? Or was it something more, something intelligent, that simply found a way to use Martha's tragedy to manifest? Leave your theories in the comments below, and if this story made you check your clock, hit that like button and subscribe for more strange, dark, and mysterious tales. Good night, everyone, and try not to listen too closely to the silence. Why police sealed off the house on Ashwood Lane. It started with a smell. In the spring of 2014, residents of Ashwood Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac just outside of Dayton, Ohio, began to complain about a strange odor drifting from one particular house. Number 58. A two-story colonial with chipped shutters and a lawn that hadn't been mowed in months. People described it differently. Some said it was sour, others metallic. One neighbor swore it smelled like rust and wet dirt. The house belonged to the Morris family, or it had until recently. The father, Alan, had died of a heart attack 2 years earlier. His wife, Linda, reportedly moved in with her sister across town. The property was supposed to be vacant, yet people swore they saw lights flick on at night, curtains drawn, then open again, shadows passing in the upstairs windows. When police finally entered the house on April 17th, they didn't expect what they found. The front door was unlocked. The living room was cluttered, but not unusual. Old mail, magazines, a broken lamp. The kitchen counters held dishes, but nothing rotting. The smell was strongest upstairs. Officers climbed the narrow staircase, reached the hallway, and saw that every bedroom door had been sealed shut from the inside with strips of duct tape. Not neat, frantic, layer upon layer, silver against wood. They cut the tape from the first door, pushed inside. Empty. The second room, also empty, save for a pile of clothing in the corner that looked like it had been clawed through. Then came the third room. It was the master bedroom. The windows had been blacked out with garbage bags. The walls were covered floor to ceiling in writing. Not paint marker, pencil, even carved scratches. The words repeated over and over. "Don't look in the closet." The closet door was nailed shut. By this point, the officers called for backup. The nails were pulled, one by one. The door groaned open. Inside, nothing but dust, a broken hanger, and on the floor, an old Polaroid camera with no film. When they lifted it, they saw that someone had carved words into the closet floorboards beneath it. "It watches when you sleep." The photographs started showing up the next day. Detective Laura Jenkins, who took over the case, said the first envelope arrived at the station in the morning mail. No return address. Inside were 6 Polaroids. They showed the Morris house, but from angles no neighbor could have taken. One photo was of the upstairs hallway, lit by a flash. Another was of the master bedroom door, sealed in tape. Another was of someone sleeping in the bed that was supposed to be empty. The final photo was of the detective herself. Not recent. It showed her asleep on her own couch at home weeks earlier. The department went into panic mode. Jenkins swore she had never seen the camera before, never posed, never consented. Yet the image existed. When forensics examined the photos, they determined the camera that took them was the same Polaroid found in the Morris closet. But the Polaroid had no film, and the battery compartment was corroded beyond use. 2 more envelopes arrived that week. Each contained photos of different people in the neighborhood, kids asleep in their rooms, a man reading in his living room, a woman brushing her hair in the upstairs mirror. Every shot was taken through glass, or from a corner of the room no one remembered standing in. Police canvassed the entire block, checking locks, interviewing every resident. No one had seen anyone strange. No one admitted to breaking in. And yet, every family on Ashwood Lane had received at least one photo of themselves inside their own home. That's when the department made the call. They sealed off number 58 Ashwood Lane. Yellow tape across the doors, patrol cars parked at either end of the street, neighbors ordered not to approach the house, and still, the photos came. Theories spread fast. Some believed the house had been used as a hideout by a stalker, someone who had hidden in the crawl spaces, moving through attics and basements, slipping in and out of closets. Others said the house itself was wrong, that the walls were thinner than they looked, that someone could pass between them unseen. A construction worker who'd helped build the cul-de-sac back in the 1970s told reporters something odd. He said the blueprints originally showed 6 houses on that side of the street, but the company had poured foundations for 7. It didn't match, he said. We asked the developer about it. He told us not to worry. So we didn't. By May, the photos had escalated. Envelopes now contained images of officers on duty, standing guard at the Morris house, walking the perimeter, even sitting in their cruisers. All of them taken from impossible angles, as if someone had been standing inches away with a flash, but no one had seen anything. Detective Jenkins herself received another photo. Her asleep again, but this time in her bed, with the Polaroid camera resting on her chest. She swore she never allowed it. One night, officers heard noise from inside the house. At 2:46 a.m., they reported footsteps upstairs, pacing back and forth. The backup unit entered within minutes. Every room was empty, every window sealed. The closet door in the master bedroom had been nailed shut again. Fresh silver heads gleaming in the flashlight beams. The nails hadn't been there during the last search. By summer, Ashwood Lane had become a ghost street. Families moved out, spooked by the constant surveillance. Kids stopped playing outside. The Morris house stood silent behind tape and barricades, its windows dark. But neighbors claimed they still saw movement inside. A figure pacing, curtains shifting, the glint of a camera flash at night. The official record ends with the house being condemned in 2015. Structural hazard, the city said. They planned to demolish it. Yet the house never came down. If you go to Ashwood Lane today, number 58 still stands, boarded up, its yard overgrown, the mailbox rusting on its side. No one lives there. No one mows the lawn. But every so often, neighbors swear they see envelopes on the porch, plain manila, no writing, and when those envelopes are opened, inside are Polaroids. Of the current residents on Ashwood Lane, asleep, reading, cooking, standing by windows they thought were closed, no one knows who takes them. No one knows how. The last known image surfaced in 2019. It was posted anonymously online. It showed a police officer sealing yellow tape across the Morris house, his back to the lens, his head bowed slightly. The words, "Don't look in the closet," were written in marker across the photo's bottom edge. But the strangest part? That officer had retired 4 years earlier, and the uniform he wore in the picture was not the one issued by the Dayton Police Department. That is why, to this day, number 58 Ashwood Lane remains sealed. Not because of crime scene protocol, not because of mold or gas leaks, but because sometimes, at 2:45 in the morning, neighbors say they hear the click of a Polaroid shutter echoing down the street, and if you look closely enough, you might see the flash reflect in the upstairs window. Even though the curtains are nailed shut, the camera saw what her eyes couldn't. All right, folks, settle in. Grab a hot drink, maybe pull that blanket a little tighter, because tonight we're diving into a story that's a classic blend of strange, dark, and mysterious. It's a tale that challenges our very perception of reality, an account that comes to us from the deep, shadowed hollows of the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. A place where the hills hold secrets, and sometimes those secrets refuse to stay buried. This isn't about what your eyes think they see. No, this is about what a cold, unblinking lens can capture, something her eyes never could. Our protagonist in this unsettling narrative is a woman named Chloe. Chloe was a freelance web designer, a creative soul who loved the solitude that rural living offered. She had recently purchased a small, rustic cabin tucked away down a long, winding gravel road, surrounded by ancient, towering trees. The cabin was old, with a wide, inviting front porch, a stone fireplace, and windows that peered into a seemingly endless expanse of dense forest. She relished the quiet, the crisp mountain air, the feeling of being truly disconnected from the relentless hum of the city. It was her sanctuary, a place where she felt she could finally breathe. Initially, her life in the cabin was everything she had dreamed of. Peaceful mornings, productive workdays, and evenings spent under a canopy of countless stars. She had a small dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Rusty, who was her constant companion, always trotting happily beside her on their daily walks through the woods. Then, things started to feel off. It began subtly, as these things often do. A faint whisper of air, a sudden chill in a perfectly warm room. Chloe would be working at her desk, engrossed in a design, and she'd feel a strange, fleeting draft even with all the windows and doors securely closed. Rusty, usually a boisterous and fearless little dog, would sometimes whine softly, staring intently at an empty corner of the room, his hackles slightly raised. Chloe would dismiss it as the old house settling or Rusty reacting to a squirrel outside. She was, after all, a rational person. But the incidents became more frequent, more insistent. A cupboard door she swore she had closed would be slightly ajar. A book she had left on her nightstand would be on the floor the next morning. Small, easily explainable things on their own, but together they formed a pattern of subtle, unsettling disruption. Chloe started to feel a prickle of unease, a sense that she wasn't quite alone even when Rusty was asleep at her feet. One particularly blustery evening, a strong gust of wind unlatched her back porch door, causing it to swing open with a bang. While nothing was stolen, the incident unnerved her enough to finally invest in a proper security system. She purchased a set of high-definition, motion-activated cameras, placing one on her front porch, one overlooking the backyard, and one inside the main living area, positioned to capture the entryway and a good portion of the main room. She felt a sense of relief once they were installed, a practical solution to her growing unease. The cameras hummed to life, silent sentinels watching over her cabin. For a few uneventful days, they only captured Rusty chasing squirrels or Chloe herself walking through the frame. She started to relax, convinced that her anxieties had simply been amplified by the isolation. Then, one Monday morning, as she reviewed the overnight footage, she saw it. It was from the living room camera, time-stamped at precisely 1:47 a.m. Rusty was asleep on his dog bed, snoring softly. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the moon filtering through the windows. And then, a fleeting distortion. Just at the very edge of the frame, near the archway leading to the kitchen, a quick, shadowy blur darted from right to left. It was so fast, so indistinct, that if she hadn't been reviewing the footage frame by frame, she would have missed it entirely. It was darker than the shadows, faster than any animal she knew, and yet it seemed to have a human-like form, albeit elongated and impossibly swift. Chloe's heart leaped into her throat. She replayed it, again and again, slowing the footage down as much as possible. It was still a blur, but undeniably there. It moved with a jerky, almost unnatural fluidity. Not a bug, not dust on the lens. Something moved, in her living room, in the dead of night, while she and Rusty slept. And her eyes had seen absolutely nothing at the time. She spent the entire day trying to debunk it. She checked the camera settings, adjusted the motion sensitivity, even watched the same spot in the room for hours, trying to recreate the lighting conditions. Nothing. Her logical mind screamed for a rational explanation, but she couldn't find one. The footage was clear, the anomaly was there, and her own perception had completely missed it. The incidents continued, but only the cameras saw them. Every night, in the early morning hours, usually between 1:30 a.m. and 2:00 a.m., the cameras would capture something. Sometimes it was that fleeting, shadowy blur darting across the room. Other times, it was a subtle flicker in the light, a momentary darkening that the human eye would register as nothing, but the camera's unblinking lens recorded with chilling precision. Rusty would often be captured on film, whimpering in his sleep, or suddenly waking and staring intently at the exact spot where the camera had just recorded an anomaly. Chloe's own eyes, however, never saw anything in real time. She'd wake to Rusty's low growl, look up, and see an empty room. But the camera knew. The consistency of the time was the most unsettling aspect. Always in that narrow window, just before 2:00 a.m. It felt like a scheduled performance, a nightly haunting that only the cold digital eye of the camera was privy to. Chloe started losing significant sleep, her creative work suffered, she looked perpetually tired, her eyes constantly darting around the room, even in broad daylight. She was a prisoner in her own cabin, dreading the approach of night, knowing that unseen things were stirring in her home, captured only by the silent witnesses mounted on her walls. She knew it sounded insane. She knew anyone she told would think she was imagining things, that the isolation was getting to her. But the footage, the undeniable, horrifying footage, that was her proof. Finally, at the end of her rope, Chloe called her best friend, a no-nonsense photographer named Marcus. Marcus was a skeptic by nature, but also deeply loyal to Chloe. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed, as Chloe recounted the strange occurrences, her voice barely a whisper, her laptop open to display the chilling video clips. "Chloe?" he said. Finally, his voice carefully neutral, "This looks odd. It could be a trick of the light, lens flare, anything. But the consistency is definitely unsettling." He picked up his own professional camera, a high-end model with advanced low-light capabilities. "I'll stay a few nights. We'll set up some of my gear, maybe a different angle, different lenses. Will show us something else, or nothing at all." Marcus, despite his skepticism, felt a prickle of unease as he set up his gear. He placed cameras with infrared capabilities, motion sensors, and even a thermal camera, all pointed at the areas where Chloe's system had recorded anomalies. He wasn't going to let his friend suffer alone, even if it was just her imagination. That first night, Marcus settled onto the sofa, his professional cameras recording silently, their red indicator lights blinking faintly. He brought a notebook, determined to document every creak, every shadow. He heard Chloe pacing softly upstairs. The cabin was utterly still, the only sound the soft hum of his equipment. He checked his watch. 1:40 a.m. A nervous energy began to settle over him. He was looking directly at the archway to the kitchen, the very spot where Chloe's camera had captured the clearest anomaly. He strained his eyes, trying to pierce the gloom. Nothing. Just the familiar lines of the old cabin. And then, precisely at 1:47 a.m., Marcus felt it, a sudden, profound drop in temperature right beside him, as if a large block of ice had materialized out of thin air. He shivered violently, his breath misting in the cold. His thermal camera, he knew, would be picking up a significant change. He glanced at the monitor for his thermal camera. A distinct, cold patch, shaped vaguely like a human form, had just appeared near the kitchen archway, then vanished. He hadn't seen anything with his eyes, not a single thing. But the temperature drop was undeniable, and the thermal camera, it had seen. He stood up, his heart pounding. The coldness dissipated as quickly as it had arrived. He walked to the archway, sweeping the empty space with his eyes. Nothing, just the familiar, comforting shadows. He returned to his sofa, shaken to his core. He hadn't seen the shadowy blur that Chloe had captured, but he had felt its cold presence, and his cameras, they had recorded it. The next morning, Marcus was as pale and shaken as Chloe often was. He showed her the thermal footage, the distinct, chilling drop in temperature, the fleeting, cold form. "My eyes saw nothing, Chloe," he said, his voice hushed. "But the camera, The camera saw the cold. Together, they delved into the history of the cabin and the land. They visited the local archives, old newspaper clippings, and spoke to the few longtime residents who remembered the area from decades past. They were looking for something, anything, that could explain the phenomenon. They found it. A tragic, almost forgotten tale from nearly a century ago. The cabin had once belonged to a family, the Andersons. They had a young daughter, Lily, who loved to play in the surrounding woods. One late autumn day, Lily went missing. A massive search was launched, involving nearly everyone in the small community. Days turned into weeks, but Lily was never found. Her parents, heartbroken and consumed by grief, eventually left the cabin, unable to bear the memories. The local legend was that Lily had simply vanished into the woods, never to be seen again. Some older residents whispered that she had been playing hide and seek and simply got too good at hiding. The most chilling detail they uncovered, however, came from an old, yellowed police report from the missing persons case. It detailed the initial findings, the search efforts, and the last known time Lily was seen. A neighbor who had been chatting with Lily's mother on the porch recalled seeing Lily playing near the kitchen window, just inside the house. The neighbor had glanced at her watch, noting the time, before Lily darted out of sight. The time: 1:47 a.m. Chloe and Marcus stared at the report, a cold dread washing over them. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. The fleeting shadow, the consistent time, the chilling cold. It wasn't a malicious entity. It was Lily, forever playing hide and seek in her old home, forever darting through the rooms, just out of sight, just beyond human perception. The camera wasn't picking up a ghost, perhaps. It was picking up the residual energy of a child, forever trapped in a moment of playful innocence, forever trying to be seen. Chloe couldn't live there anymore. The cabin, once her sanctuary, now felt like a lonely playground for a lost child. She sold it, not daring to mention the camera footage or the chilling history to the new owners. She just wanted to escape the constant unseen presence. She lives in a new apartment now, in a bustling city, surrounded by people and constant noise. She has no security cameras inside her home. She sleeps soundly, undisturbed by fleeting shadows or unexplained chills. But sometimes, when the silence of the night is particularly deep, she'll wake for no reason, a cold sweat on her brow. She'll glance at her clock, and if it's anywhere near 1:47 a.m., she can almost feel it. Not the cold, not a whisper, but the faint childlike energy of someone playing a game just out of sight, and she wonders if Lily, in that old cabin deep in the West Virginia mountains, is still darting through the rooms, and if, somewhere, a new owner's camera, unblinking and patient, is still capturing what her eyes couldn't. So, what do you think happened to Lily? Was she truly lost to the woods, her playful spirit forever bound to her home? Or was it something more, something that uses innocence as a way to linger? Leave your theories in the comments below, and if this story made you think twice about what your own security cameras might be seeing, hit that like button and subscribe for more strange, dark, and mysterious tales. Good night, everyone, and remember, not everything that moves can be seen. The unsolved case of the hotel room that shouldn't exist. They call it the room that shouldn't exist, but that isn't how it started. It started as a wrong turn. On a rain-heavy Friday, a sales rep named Evan Holt pulled off I-70 in eastern Kansas and checked into the Graybridge Hotel, a square, stubborn building with a carpet that smelled like old coffee and pool chlorine. The lobby clock said 9:12 p.m. The clerk, college kid, name tag read Trevor, gave Evan a keycard and a weary smile. "You're in 214, Trevor said. Elevator is down, stairs are to your left." Evan lugged his garment bag up 2 flights, turned right at the ice machine, and walked the length of the hall. 210, 212, 214. He swiped, the light flickered red. He tried again red. He sighed, balanced the bag against his knee, and called the desk. "It's not working," he said. Trevor apologized, said he'd reprogram it, asked him to come back down. Evan looked at the stairwell door at the end of the hall and thought, not in these shoes. He tried the key again green, but the handle wouldn't turn. He set the bag down and, without knowing why, glanced left. There was a short, unlit spur of hallway he hadn't noticed. A fire door stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, a square of carpet darker than the rest. He nudged the door with 2 fingers. The hydraulic closer hissed like a warning, then gave. 10 feet of corridor, 1 door, 209. He should have gone back downstairs. He should have. He tried the key out of stubbornness more than anything. The light glowed green, the satisfying kind, the kind that says welcome back, and the handle gave under his hand. He pushed. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and long-closed books, beige bedspread, bolted dresser with a TV that remembered other decades, the standard abstract painting that pretends color is a landscape. It was warmer than the hall. The air unit under the window ticked even though it wasn't on. Evan flicked the switch. The lamp answered with the soft shiver of dust burning off. He stepped in, set the garment bag on the luggage rack, and shut the door. That's when the phone rang. Not his cell, the room phone. OLD style in block letters on the faceplate. The red message light flashed just once, and then the ring metallic. Patient. Evan didn't move. It rang 4 times and quit. He laughed at himself, at the new hotel weirdness, at the way empty places inherit whatever you bring into them, and finished kicking off his shoes. He checked the lock. It was one of those swings that never makes you feel better. He said it anyway. He slept fast and hard. He woke at 2:43 a.m. to the feeling of someone sitting on the edge of the bed. Not weight pressure in the air like the room had made space for a person. He reached for the lamp. The bulb threw a small circle of light that made everything else darker. At the foot of the bed, something was wrong with the carpet. A darker rectangle, as if a trunk had lived there too long. The phone blinked once. The line on the faceplate front desk lit itself without ringing. Then it went dead. Evan got up, walked to the window, and pulled back the heavy drape. The parking lot glow made the rain look like a sheet of beads. He pressed his palm to the glass just to feel something he could name, cold, solid. When he turned back, the darker rectangle on the carpet had shifted, or he had decided to be afraid of it. He left the lamp on and slept badly until gray light thinned the room. At checkout, he mentioned the broken key. Trevor looked up, frowning. "You're 214, he said, tapping on the monitor. "Weird. My system shows you never opened the door." Evan said, "I stayed in 209. Trevor blinked at him. Slowly. "We don't have a 209. Evan waited for the smirk. It didn't come. Trevor turned the monitor toward him. There was the second floor list. 201, 203, 205, odd numbers on the left, even on the right. 207, 208, 210, then the fire door, then the stairwell. No 209. "You probably saw the housekeeping closet," Trevor said, too bright. "People think it's a room." It wasn't a closet. "Housekeeping keeps forgetting to lock that door." Trevor's smile thinned. "Have a good one." On Monday, Evan told himself it made a good road story. On Tuesday, he told it again and found he didn't like the way it landed in his own mouth. On Wednesday, he called Layla his sister, the one who believed in proof, and said, "Tell me a door can be printed wrong. Tell me a key can open a closet." She said, "Go back in daylight." He did. 2 weeks later, in the middle of a too bright afternoon, Evan pulled into the Graybridge and asked for a room on the second floor. Trevor wasn't there. The woman at the desk, name tag AMY, put him in 206 with a practiced nod. He took the stairs, past the ice machine, walked to the fire door, and pushed. It didn't move. He tried harder. The closer resisted with an honest hydraulic sigh. Behind it, he could see the dark strip of carpet, the number plaque at the end, light catching on embossed brass. He went back down. "Can you open the fire door on 2?" he asked. "I think someone jammed it." Amy looked up, then past him, as if waiting for a manager who didn't exist. "Fire doors aren't for guests," she said. "Is your room okay?" "Show me your floor plan," he said, not nicely. She made a show of checking policy. She printed a map. The spur hall wasn't on it. The little square, where 209 should have been, was white space. That evening, he walked the second floor with his phone camera rolling. He filmed his hand pushing the fire door and failing. He filmed the brass 2 on the stair door and the angle where the hall turned back into itself. He filmed the seam between the visible and the hidden until the battery said enough. In the lobby, he held up the screen. "This area is there," he said, "but not there." Amy called the manager. The manager, Mr. Hines, shirt tucked in like it hurt, walked up with him. Mr. Hines put a key in the fire door's slot and turned. The mechanism sighed, the heavy slab gave way, and the little spur of hall opened like a held breath. The air inside was warmer, unused warm. The carpet was a shade darker, and not from light. Hines frowned. "Maintenance," he said, as if that would fix geometry. He led them to the door at the end. No number, only the ghost of one, a clean square where a plaque had been. Hines tried his master key. Red. He tried again, green, then red, as if the lock were deciding who it wanted to be. "Not today," he said, and laughed wrong. He closed the fire door on whatever small wrong the hotel had been hiding and did not reopen it. "Call me if your AC acts up," he told Evan in the hall, pretending they had been in a different conversation. That night, Evan lay in 206 and watched the corner where the ceiling met the wall the way you watch a dog stare at a place you can't see. The room phone didn't ring. At 2:43, the air changed the way it does when the heater cycles on. He got up, walked barefoot into the hall, and put his palm flat against the fire door. Warm. From the other side, very close, a sound, soft, like a coat sleeve against painted wood. Then a single knock, polite. He flinched. The sound did not repeat. He left at dawn. On the interstate shoulder, he sat with the hazards on and the engine off and told Layla everything. She told him to call the police. He said, "About what?" She had no answer that would fit inside a report. Weeks later, when he thought the story had gotten bored and left him alone, a detective called him. Morales. Low voice, punctual tone. "You stayed at the Gray Bridge," she said. "Not a question. Come down to the station. I need you to look at something." She slid a thin folder across a fake wood table. Inside were 4 Polaroids, browned at the edges. Evan knew the angle before he understood what he was seeing. The bed. The bolted dresser. The abstract painting a little crooked. The darker rectangle on the carpet. A plastic ice bucket on the bathroom counter that didn't look like it had been touched in a long time. The back of a chair with a scrape along the top rail. "Room 209, he said, and felt foolish as soon as he made the number a sound. Morales tapped a report. "There isn't one," she said. "Not on the books, not on the plans. Building was renovated after a kitchen fire 13 years ago. They reconfigured the hall. The space, that would be 209, was supposed to be sealed for ducting a mechanical void. But housekeeping logs from that year show 209 do not enter, scribbled in 3 different hands. Then the notation just stops. What am I looking at? Photos found in the belongings of a drifter who died behind the truck stop. He had a room key to this hotel. The Polaroids were in his coat, wrapped in a bar napkin. The timestamp on the back ink puts them the week a housekeeper went missing. She held his gaze too long. She was last seen on 2. Her cart was parked by the fire door. "Did you find her?" Morales looked at the table. "No." They pulled maintenance records. 2 incidents of guest-reported odd calls from non-existent extension. 1 note, room phone shows missed call 9. They pulled the PBX logs. Between 2:40 and 2:50 on 8 different nights, the system registered a call originating from extension 209 to the front desk, 4 rings, no voicemail. No physical line was wired to that number. There wasn't a jack to trace. They found a contractor who'd worked the renovation. He said there had been a door there once and a room you could step into and out of like rooms are supposed to do. After the fire, the owners wanted tighter HVAC and a storage nook off the spur. "We framed it," he said, rubbing a thumb along the memory. "Closed it up. 2 days later, I walked the hall and the painters were prepping a door. I told the foreman. He told me I was on the wrong floor. We laughed about it for like a week, then we stopped laughing. Another contractor remembered an argument over a brass plaque. They couldn't decide whether to skip the number or not. Superstition, he said. You don't leave a hole in a run, people talk. They retired the number on paper. The badge still got stamped." Morales asked Evan to walk her through it step by step. He told her about the key, the odorless warmth, the single, polite knock. She had him sign a statement that read like a short story someone would make fun of at a bar. At the end, she said, "We'll probably never open that door." "Because you can't?" "Because I don't like what happens if we do." He didn't go back for months. When he did, it was because bad habits feel like proof. The Graybridge had new carpet. The ice machine had learned a quieter cough. Trevor had aged a year and started to wear a tie. Evan asked for the second floor and got 204. He walked to the spur. The fire door was fitted with an alarm and a little sticker. "Do not prop." He pressed his ear to the seam the way you might listen to a seashell and pretend you can hear the ocean. Warmth. A smell like lemon cleaner trying to cover a different smell. He whispered why. He didn't know. "Hello?" From the other side, a human sound and not a human sound at once, the smallest breath, an intake, like someone had been about to speak and changed their mind. He didn't push. He went back to his room. At 2:43, the room phone lit without ringing. The red LED pulsed once. He picked up. "Front desk," he said, because he didn't know who else to be. Static. Then, under it, the murmur of a TV too low to make out and the dry scrape of a chair leg over carpet. "Housekeeping," a woman's voice said. Calm, tired, not asking, stating. Then the line went dead, and the message light blinked one long blink and stopped. He didn't sleep. At dawn, he checked out. Amy wished him a good day with the exact tone of someone who has been taught to mean it. He stepped into the rain and watched the hotel's brick face hold its shape like a person who knows what's being said about them and has decided to outlast the story. There isn't a solved ending. There's a cardboard banker's box in a county storage room with Morales' handwriting on the tab and the word Graybridge underlined twice. There are 3 statements from housekeepers. 2 retired, one who moved states saying they used to push their carts past a door with no number and sometimes the handle was warm. There is a maintenance form in triplicate, reseat fire door closer to in-floor spur. There's a Polaroid of a bed that looks like every other bed you've ever seen, and a darker rectangle on the carpet at the foot of it, like something heavy had once been there and then decided not to be. If you drive I-70, you can pull off and find the Graybridge. You can ask for a room on 2. You can walk past the ice machine and stand at the fire door and put your hand on the seam. It will feel like paint over steel. Cool if the AC is doing its job. If you come at night, it might feel warmer. You might hear nothing. You might hear a single polite knock that does not repeat. You might go back to your perfectly normal room and watch your phone's message light pulse one time, just once, and stop. The hotel doesn't list a 209. The plans don't show it. The phone system doesn't admit the extension exists. But somewhere, at the exact hour when rooms decide what they're going to be, a line opens and a breath crosses it, and a door that shouldn't be there remembers how to be a door. And if you ask the front desk about it, they'll shrug and tell you the elevator is down, stairs to your left, ice machine at the corner, and please don't prop the fire door. It sets off the alarm, it lets in warm air, it invites questions, and sometimes it invites a room that shouldn't exist to try one more time to be found.